Hay un terrible caso de corrupción en la Unión Europea y Ursula von der Leyen está más preocupada por darle más dinero a Zelensky. Mira, todos estamos, por supuesto, todos estamos enfocados en la terrible situación de Zelensky. ¿Qué es lo que va a hacer? ¿Cómo va a realizar ciertas acciones, sobre todo? Porque al final del día, Ursula von der Leyen tiene un problema, tiene un escándalo de corrupción en el bloque, entre los miembros de este bloque. A la ex jefa de la política exterior de la Unión Europea está siendo acusada de fraude y corrupción. Malversación de fondos, el uso de su poder, en fin, corrupción, algo normal en la Unión Europea. Pero, mientras eso pasa, Ursula von der Leyen hizo algo interesante. Le dio dinero a Zelensky. Así es, otra vez, le dieron más dinero a Zelensky. Además, acordaron darle un préstamo que sea respaldado por los fondos soberanos rusos. Esta mujer está dispuesta a acabar con todo el bloque europeo. Así es. Y no te sorprendas que el día de mañana no tengas ni para comer.
Indeed, we have been discussing and then adopting the proposals for a potential reparations loan. So the backdrop against which this has been decided is the fact that Ukraine really stands at a critical juncture. The negotiations towards peace are ongoing, while we see that Russia is increasing its attacks. They are intensifying, and we see also in parallel the growing needs for financing of Ukraine. If you look at the IMF estimates that Ukraine will need 135 billion euros for the next 2 years. That is 2026 and 2027. This is needed to keep the state and the basic services running, so the civilian side, but also to continue enabling the brave resistance on the battlefield of Ukraine, so the military side. As from the beginning, Ukraine can rely on the fact that Europe will remain the strongest and most steadfast partner. We all know that we can never match the sacrifice of the Ukrainian people, but what we can match is their stamina, their resolve, their staying power, and we can equip them with the means to defend themselves and to lead peace negotiations from a position of strength. And since pressure is the only language the Kremlin responds to, we can also dial it up. We have to increase the costs of war for Putin's aggression, and today's proposal gives us the means to do this. So what is this proposal? Today we are proposing to cover 2/3 of Ukraine's financing needs for the next 2 years. So this is 90 billion euros. The remainder would be for international partners to cover. And today we are tabling 2 solutions to member states to agree on. The first solution is EU borrowing. That is basically raising capital at the capital markets and using the EU budget as a guarantee for that, and hand this capital as a loan to Ukraine. This solution must be established by unanimity. And the second solution that we are proposing today in the legal text is a so-called reparations loan. Here we would use the cash balances from the immobilized Russian assets in the European Union. We propose to cover all financial institutions that have accumulated such cash balances, and these institutions would have to move the cash into the instrument of the reparations loan. So, in other words, we're taking the cash balances, we're providing them to Ukraine as a loan, and Ukraine has to pay back this loan if and when Russia is paying reparations. This solution can be established by qualified majority voting. Then there's the question how we would use the money. First, we would use the money for Ukraine budget support. And here we would build on the success of existing instruments. You know them both. That is, on one hand, either macro-financial assistance and or the Ukraine facility. And the second topic where we will be using this money is military support. Here the main goal is to further boost Ukraine's defense industrial capabilities and integrate their capacities into our defense industrial base. And here we would use a so-called Cascadian principle. In other words, the funds would be used predominantly to produce and purchase from Ukraine and the European Union and so-called EE.UU countries. But if we have urgent needs that cannot be met by Ukraine or the European Union, then we allow with this money the purchase of these urgent needs from outside. Now, we had an intense discussion also on the position of Belgium, where Euroclear, the main source, is situated. We have listened very carefully to Belgium's concerns, and we have taken almost all of them into account in our proposal that is today on the table of the reparations loans. We have very strong safeguards in place to protect member states and to reduce the risks as much as possible. For example, to ensure that an illegitimate award outside the Union cannot be enforced inside the Union. And very important, we have created a very strong solidarity mechanism where in the very end the Union can intervene, because we want to make very sure to all our member states, but specifically also to Belgium, that one thing is for sure: we will share the burden in a fair way, as it is the European way.
La Unión Europea, o en este caso Ursula von der Leyen, no entiende que nadie está de acuerdo con esto. Lagarde, la presidenta del Banco Europeo, dijo no. Dijo que las cosas se pueden complicar, que no están de acuerdo, al parecer, con este préstamo, con el uso de Euroclear. Ya no pueden hacer más. En una conferencia de prensa, precisamente, Lagarde dijo esto. Vamos a verlo.
The position that we have held in all the efforts that we could deploy to support the Commission in facilitating various options, and two options, as you know, have been published today in order to help Ukraine, which needs help. What I have said very clearly, and what the team around me has said, is we will do everything we can, but we will not violate the treaty. It's not that we are refusing, it's just that we are saying we have to respect the Treaty of Europe in relation to the functioning of the European Central Bank. And my strong hope, because I have not had a chance to review the last version that was just published about, 40 minutes ago, but my strong hope is that the very excellent drafters and communicators around this project have found a way to call a spade a spade. It is a fiscal obligation that we all have. So when the fiscal space is not there, we have to find a way. And there are ways that have been identified, and in particular option 2 is one of the ways that has been identified, the issuance of bonds that would be specifically intended to finance Ukraine.
Ni siquiera el Banco Central Europeo se atreve a tomar el dinero y dárselo a Ucrania. Ni siquiera. Saben que es peligroso. Saben que Rusia podría responder de una forma que no les guste. Pero bueno, están dispuestos a todo. Si este video te gustó, no olvides darle like y compartir y suscribirte. Nos vemos la próxima.